You don't want accidents. You don't want OSHA. You don't want pinch points, like all of those things. They need to understand the equipment before they can actually understand the safety aspect of it and being able to apply and combine those two together. The other thing too is that they need to understand quality. What does good quality look like? What does bad quality look like? How is it going to impact based off of these things that you're changing to the equipment? And then the other things too is like just even understanding like soft skills, human skills, or even just kind of like lean manufacturing principles too, of like, how can we make this better? How can we make this more effective? So with all of these things being identified in this one department that I ended up working with, I put together like a presentation around like understand the process. Like if we're going through, call it like a cold mill breakdown, here's what's happening, here's the time spent, here's all these steps and how you impact that process.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Danielle Suprick. Danielle is a workplace engineer blending engineering, industrial and organizational psychology, and sales skills to engineer high-performing, human-centered workplaces. She leads strategic learning initiatives in leadership development, onboarding, job analysis, and process improvement that drive measurable results. She is passionate about advancing IO psychology in industrial settings to equip leaders and practitioners with practical tools for workplace excellence. Congrats on equipping your leaders and practitioners with practical tools for workplace excellence, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
It perfectly fits.
So I'm really excited to unpack some of this because it's understanding the kind of IO psychology side of things is really important, and how companies can apply that training to their teams these days seems more important than ever. So please unpack again what exactly IO psychology is for people that might not be aware of it, and how it impacts the employees in a workplace when applied properly.
Yeah, great question. And I appreciate you asking that. So industrial and organizational psychology, or IO psychology, as we call it, is really the scientific study of human behaviors in the workplace, being able to apply psychological principles, as well as data and evidence-based research to improve productivity, relationships, well-being, organizational effectiveness, everything that really has to do with the human in the workplace environment.
And so where are a lot of companies kind of lacking in the understanding or application of these tools? Because I mean, you hear a lot about kind of employees doing like quiet quitting, and people not really feeling connected to their work, and companies aren't seeing as much kind of productivity or value from the employees. And it seems obviously something is not working here. And so how does IO psychology, when it's applied, help fix some of these problems?
Yeah, so in order to answer that question, I feel like I might need to step back a little bit to kind of explain how I got to where I am currently.
Sure.
So I actually have my undergrad in mechanical engineering, have spent over a decade in the manufacturing space, doing applications engineering, sales, and I noticed a lot of gaps, again, with the human side of things as I was doing a lot of sales and the application, and just like things like leadership development, effective communication, conflict management. When I ended up joining several different organizations, I noticed a lack of onboarding. They kind of join the culture, the organization, they give you the standard orientation, and then they say go. They don't really equip you with like the knowledge and skills that you might need in order to actually do that position, whether that's like software or cultural or like who to go to, or maybe you're lacking some kind of foundational knowledge that's like understanding process within the organization. A lot of companies kind of skip over that. Or I also noticed like a lack of change management practices. Maybe you're acquiring a new company and you're trying to figure out how to merge them. that requires like human change management, not just like process change management. So all of these things are what I was seeing as far as gaps within my over a decade of experience within the manufacturing engineering space. So that's why I decided to pursue IO psychology to really kind of help address those gaps and bring like this data driven insight behind it. So within my current workplace environment, I do training and development. We had an extremely high turnover rate of over 50%. I was pretty much just kind of told to come and help fix this. I was like, well, where do I even start with this? They gave me about a month to kind of go around, talk to different department managers, talk to the people out really out on the floor doing the job to really kind of come up with what's going on, what process am I going to take? And through all of this, identified that there was really a lack of role clarity. I didn't really understand knowledge, skills, and abilities that somebody might need for a position. So I went back to my leadership team. I was like, hey, I think I need to do this job analysis. And a job analysis is really this kind of method of collecting all this data to understand, again, knowledge, skills, and abilities, gain role clarity, understand how people like engage or how they're satisfied with things. And then from that, being able to actually put together a program or even develop content to help somebody on board within certain departments. So all of this are certain aspects of IO psychology. IO psychology is so broad when you think about it, because there's the industrial side, which is kind of more like your individual side, the hiring, selection process, recruitment, training and development. And then the O side is more of your organizational psychology. So leadership development, change management, and all of these things are definitely needed within an organization. I think there's a lot of companies that are doing a lot of great things, but then some of them that could definitely use what IO psychology has to offer. I mean, there's science backed by it. There's the evidence-based research. There's the data that we can bring to making those data-informed decisions.
Yeah, I can see how when we were brought into the company and wondering why there's a 50% attrition rate, which is bad. And then understanding that people didn't have like that lack of onboarding is something that I've heard from other people that were like I've talked to that like she got recently hired and then she left after like 2 weeks because she was brought in. There was like no, they kind of said, oh, that's not your problem. She's like, I don't even know what all my responsibilities are. And people just kind of started dumping stuff on her that she wasn't prepared to handle. She had basically no onboarding, just going to go talk to a client about this problem they have, but she doesn't know the client, doesn't know what's like, has no frame of reference, is kind of thrown to the wolves. And so she bounced after a couple of weeks. And that kind of, I don't know how executives and leaders like companies just think that's okay, that that's actually how you can run a business. And so I meant like I'd love to hear more about kind of what you've done at this company now that you once kind of this initial like month of it talking to people, which obviously people weren't talking with the employees and the different team members on what their experience was like to uncover these problems. So what did you learn from those discussions and what were some of the changes you made? You mentioned like some content, but like what was that more of that? I love to hear more like the next step of the story, the transformation, because it seems like it's something that a lot of companies, especially as you're trying to scale and you bring in more people and there's more and more of these systems that are needed and processes, and you're trying to expand the headcount or expand more of like what your business is doing, that you need to make sure you have the foundational stuff figured out, because you start bringing in more people and just kind of throwing them to the wolves, they're not going to stick around. So what was the kind of next step of you implementing this content and the tools you mentioned?
Yeah, so it sounds like there's definitely a lot of organizations that throw employees to the wolves, which is something that like I've experienced myself. As far as like using IO psychology to do this, initially I started with a pilot program in one of our departments. I ended up going through the job analysis. So that was doing observations actually out on the floor with what are the guys actually doing. I was reading through documentation that we currently had, identifying like even terminology that was unique. That I was like, I have no clue what this is. And I can almost guarantee you somebody else reading this document that's brand new to the organization is not going to understand this. So why are they reading work instructions for, I'm putting air quotes around it, training? It was sitting down, talking with them, really trying to understand like their task. It was using a task inventory, which is the data-driven insights of them being able to give me a value on a scale of like 1 to 5 of like level of frequency that they do this task, the level of importance, the level of difficulty, all of those things to really help kind of paint this picture of what it is that they need to know. And from this pilot program, the things that I kept kind of running into, not only within this department, but then also other departments that I've worked with, is for manufacturing and for our company, they really need to understand the process, like how maybe the product flows or like the steps in the process. They need to understand the equipment because there's a lot of safety related to it, especially in the manufacturing space. You don't want accidents. You don't want OSHA, you don't want pinch points, like all of those things. They need to understand the equipment before they can actually understand the safety aspect of it and being able to apply and combine those two together. The other thing too is that they need to understand quality. What does good quality look like? What does bad quality look like? How is it going to impact based off of these things that you're changing to the equipment? And then the other things too is like just even understanding like soft skills, human skills, or even just kind of like lean manufacturing principles too, of like, how can we make this better? How can we make this more effective? So with all of these things being identified in this one department that I ended up working with, I put together like a presentation around like understand the process. Like if we're going through, call it like a cold mill breakdown, here's what's happening, here's the time spent, here's all these steps and how you impact that process. It was putting together like training content around the equipment and terminology. What does this piece of equipment do? Why is it important? How does it impact the process? Do you use this piece of equipment when you're in a breakdown or like a one pass? Again, even safety, because my current organization, we have, I think like 2.5, I think 3 days now of compliant OSHA training. In my opinion, it goes through a lot of information, but it checks a box. The one thing that I've heard, especially from a lot of data collection or doing surveys with the employee, is they want hands-on experience actually out on the floor. And so I would do department specific safety training, and it would just be a repetition of what maybe they already heard in that 2.5 days, but maybe it went more in depth based off of the equipment and the process that they were working in. It was also like pointed directions, because initially with this one department, they would have them stand behind the rail and watch for a half a day of observations. And I was like, well, what are you actually watching for? Who should they be watching for? How do they understand like where they're at in this process? Like, and all of these things kind of came together to put together a training program that right now we currently go through in about a week and a half, with a lot of like hands-on on the floor, timely information that's applicable to what they're doing that day. And the results that we've gotten, and even the feedback that I've gotten, is that we've taken our onboarding time from 90 days down to 30 days. And that can vary between person, because personality definitely comes into play here. But it's even applying like all these adult learning theories too, of how can we help somebody onboard that much quicker. So this way you're actually keeping them, they're safe, hopefully they're retaining the information. And again, it's all these like IO psychology principles that I think are beneficial, not only for manufacturing, but other organizations as well.
Yeah, I love that aspect of not only the hands-on training, not just the kind of in a classroom learning the basic, like the overview from the OSHA stuff, but then when they see how, okay, what I'm doing at this step is impacted by the previous, how it all fits into the bigger process and into what the company needs and why it's important, and how to identify the quality of what they're doing. That also, I can see how from like human aspect makes them feel like what they do has real value, and not just doing a thing, but it's doing a thing that fits into a larger picture, that fits into the larger impact that the company's trying to have and that the clients are looking for. And so it gives much more sense of purpose to the work. I think also contributes to the reducing the churn rate, because when people are not only feel like they're safe when they're doing it, which is important, and they know how to do what they're supposed to be doing, but they also know that what they're doing is adding value, and how their other people around them are depending on them to do a good job. And there's a lot more internal motivation or internal inspiration to show up and to do a good job and to make an impact, because they see what they're doing as is adding value, and is not just like, it's not done that way, or there's something that has to be done because they've been told to, or that's just because the job, but it's like, there's a bigger meaning behind it that people are craving from their jobs. They want to have a sense of like
Purpose, value.
and then a joy in it, and the sense of ownership of it. And so and especially like that, I love that, like even like the observation, a half-day observation of like, without telling them what to look at or what they should be focused, like, so just stare into space for like, how is that?
Exactly. There's a lot going on. So what should I pay attention to? I think what you're even touching on too is something that I'm even trying to advocate within my organization, of not just knowing how to do something, but why are you doing it? Because this is based off of like a lot of, again, IO psychology concepts of, if you have somebody that's actually buying into the process and what they're doing and why they're doing it, they're more satisfied, they're more involved, they're more engaged. And I'll be honest, I've had conversations with certain individuals that I've been told production workers don't need to know how they do or why they do it. They just need to know how they do it. And I was like, you're completely missing the point of like the human aspect of it.
Yeah. There's that, when people feel pride in their work, they're going to do a much better job and be a lot more reliable, and they're going to go do more with less like outside prodding, or like, they just, if you're expecting people to show up and deliver high quality results, they need that why behind it. And it makes them the fact that you've talked with people that don't get that is just like a huge red flag. That person is not equipped to lead, because if you're like, if you think you're working with machines that aren't sentient and aren't thinking about like the past, if you want people to just kind of be mindless, and like, you're not a leader, you're like a manager, or like you're an operator. But when you're dealing with human beings, having that why is, and that emotional connection to what you're doing is essential, because we're driven, as much as we like to think of ourselves as thinking beings that feel, we are very much feeling beings that occasionally think.
I love that quote.
If you can get people to feel good things about their work, they're going to do better work. And it's frustrating I'm sure frustrating as well for that, to have to explain that to someone who's in a quote unquote leadership role, who doesn't understand how people are wired, what actually motivates and inspires people to do a good job. And it's not the how, it's the why. So for listeners who think or want to apply some of this IO psychology to their workplace, what's kind of the first step? It might be just, as I'm asking this question, realize maybe just go talk to your team and kind of get a sense of what their work is, and then actually, is there anything else to kind of to kick off this process that you recommend people do to make sure that they're doing it right from the start, and aren't going to step on some unseen rakes in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe kind of back to your point, or maybe what we were talking about earlier, like job descriptions maybe not being accurate. You can't go based off that documentation. Maybe that is kind of really like talking to the individuals. What do you guys do on a day-to-day basis? I think like having those conversations are so important. That's that first start of like really identifying things. But the thing is too, is if you do like structured interview questions or have those conversations with the people actually doing the job, they actually get buy into it as well. They see that they're having an impact and changing the organization, hopefully in a positive direction. So with all of these like training initiatives that I do, I'm strongly advocating for, hey, let's meet up, let's talk about this. I want your feedback, I want your buy-in. Recently just went through like a skills matrix with one of the departments, and I had our leads participate. As we're kind of going through like the job descriptions and rewriting them, I'm saying, hey, is this accurate? Is there something that we should change? Is there something that you guys want to keep as leads that you think is really valuable, or you don't know how to verify, you just don't trust anybody else? And if not, like, okay, what can we shuffle to some other position? What can we have more like responsibilities added onto their plate? But then you have also the power to verify them and also hold them accountable to that job too. So as far as like the first step and maybe like the onboarding process is really understanding, again, pick a method, do a mixed method, don't rely on one piece of data. Compile all that information to really, like I said, identify like knowledge and skills. And then this also helps with like your selection process too when you're hiring for people. Do they have the skills or the knowledge that we need? If they don't, that's okay. Maybe this is an opportunity for organizations to start building that out, because a lot of organizations have unique like processes or knowledge or terminology that half the battle with onboarding is just understanding the terminology and who to go to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Danielle. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Danielle, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.